nervous. I want to do the right thing here. Do the right thing. It's time to get started. Okay, folks, it's 10 o'clock. Let's have a seat and get our Bibles and open up. That's okay. Peace and quiet. All right, folks, we're in Mark chapter 12. Last week we read verses 18 through the bottom of the page, which is verse 27, but that was at the very end of the class. And I mentioned something there that I said we would talk about more today. So I'm not going to read all this again. In verse 18, it says, "Then the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection." We talked about that. The Pharisees believed there was resurrection after death. The Sadducees believed there was no resurrection after death. Now, skipping all of those verses down to verse 26, and I read this last week, but he gets back to the fact that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. Verse 26. "Now about the dead rising," which was what the Sadducees believed did not happen. I'm reading out of the New International, the Pew Bible. "Have you not read in the book of Moses, in the account of the burning bush, how God said to him, 'I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob'? He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are badly mistaken." He's telling the Sadducees that they've got it wrong. Here, Jesus is saying he agrees with the Pharisees, that there is life after death, okay? About the dead rising. But he said the Sadducees had missed the boat on this one. You with me? We read this last week. Now, what's the words that I'm interested in talking with you about today? It's in verse 26, where God is talking to, in the book of Moses, how God said to him, "I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and God of Jacob." I'd like to talk to you today about I am. I am in the Old Testament, I am in the New Testament, and what it means. You ever heard a conversation about I am? Well, you're going to hear one today, okay? All right, let's get going. When he says how God said to him, "I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and God of Jacob," there's a little D there here in the New International, and it says Exodus chapter 3, verse 6. Keep a finger in Mark 12. We should come back to Mark 12, but turn over to Exodus chapter 3, because we're going to read here where this is from, okay? We're going to spend a little bit of time in Exodus chapter 3. And we're going to go back before verse 6. We're going to start in verse 2. In verse 1, it talks about Moses tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. So what kind of job did Moses have at this time? A shepherd, which was a very ordinary job. He's not a big shot. He's a nobody, doing a real kind of nobody kind of job. He's out there in the fields taking care of the flock, okay? Verse 3. "Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. Then Moses thought, 'I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up.' When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, 'Moses, Moses.' And Moses said, 'Here I am.' Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the ground where you're standing is holy ground. And then he says in verse 6 what Jesus quotes in Mark. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now, if you were on the prior page, which is page 83 in the New International, I want you to turn back over because I want to discuss with you a little bit about these words. Okay? First is in verse 2. Then the angel of the Lord. Now, do you see the word Lord there? I don't know if in your translation, but in mine, it is capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. Do you know why there all four letters are caps? Someone want to tell me why? Okay, I'll tell you why. Because not here, but on the next page, God tells Moses, and remember, this is the first day that God has met Moses. This is day one of God talking to Moses. God tells Moses what his own name is. Not a name that describes him like God or Lord. Those are generic names. But his own real name. And that's found, I'm going to jump way ahead, but that's found down verses 14 and 15 of chapter 3. That's back on page 84. I'm actually jumping out of my whack of what I was going to say, but I'm going to make the point. Verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And all of those are in caps, capital letters. I am who I am. We'll talk about that more in a minute. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am, all caps, has sent me to you. Why are they caps? Because he's saying this is a name for me. God had a lot of different names in the Old Testament. And here's one of them is I am. Okay? But that's not the end of it. Go to the next verse in verse 15. God also said to Moses, remember this on day one, hour one of God talking to Moses. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. From the name you shall call me, from generation to generation. Could he be more clear than that? And what is that name? That name is capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. Well, what is that word? Why did they put it all in caps? That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. That and what it means to say, I am. The word that's all caps, every time it's found in the Old Testament, is the Hebrew letters are JHVH or YHWH. From JHVH, which are four consonants, I'll talk about that in a second also, is where we get the word Jehovah, JHVH. YHWH is where we get the word Yahweh. I grew up saying Jehovah. Nathan grew up saying Yahweh, which is both fine, okay? But when you see those four letters capitalized, it's that word. And it's the word that God says down in Exodus 3:15, this is my name, okay? Not just a description. It's his own name. It's important to understand that. Okay, now I need to talk to you a little bit more. Is this the first time that you have this name in the Bible? Well, it's just given here in Exodus 3:15, but it's found earlier in Exodus. It's found on the prior page, when I read to you in the prior page. Chapter 3, verse 2, the angel of the L-O-R-D, all caps. And then down in verse 4, L-O-R-D, all caps. How could Moses having the name Lord before God told him the name? Think about it for just a second. You'll think of the answer maybe. Because Moses didn't write Exodus as the events happened. Moses wrote Exodus later on. And he put these names in it because he's talking about God, although he doesn't get that name for God, God's own name, until chapter 3, verse 15. Now, Exodus 3:2 is the first time it's found in Genesis, or Exodus. But you know what it's found? It's found all through the book of Genesis. In fact, the first time it's found is in Genesis chapter 2. Chapter 2 is just after creation. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord, L-O-R-D, caps, God made the heavens and the earth. And after that time, it's found so many times in Genesis that you can't hardly count them. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people think that Moses wrote Genesis. Because when he wrote Genesis, he put God's name there, the name that God had given to him in Exodus chapter 3. Okay, here's some other things that I need to kind of explain to you as we go on this. Keep your finger in Mark 12, keep your finger in Exodus 3, please. Okay, some things about Hebrew. Did you know that Hebrew does not have any vowels? It only has consonants. In English, we have vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y is a vowel. Hebrew does not have vowels. If you don't have vowels in a word, how do you know how to pronounce the word? It's not that easy. But even here, when we say that the name of God is JHVH or YHWH, why do we have those two different word letters there? It's not because they don't know what the Hebrew letter is, it's because they don't know how they pronounced it back then. Pronunciation of the consonants was hard, and they didn't have vowels. Now, I could talk about how the Jews through the years would try to put vowels in. They would have the main words, but they would have a little notation below to say, this is how you say the word, okay? And that was true until they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was in my lifetime, okay? This isn't a long time ago. When were the Dead Sea Scrolls? The Dead Sea Scrolls go back to the time of Christ, 100 years, 200 years, maybe 300 years before the time of Christ. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're telling you the Old Testament, the books of the Old Testament. There's no vowels there. There's no writings below or above the letters to say what the vowels are. Now, those folks knew how to say it, but it was still difficult because all you've got is consonants. Is this new to you guys? Have you ever heard this before? Good. Well, I knew you would have. Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the names of God in the Old Testament, names of God in the New Testament, and in particular, I am. I am. Okay, let's go on. The Jews also believed in the Old Testament times, at the time of Jesus, and to this day, that the name of God was too holy to say out loud. So when they would come to the name of God in the Bible, they would say the word Adonai, which is not the name of God. It's another word that means Lord. And it's not all caps. It's capital L-O-R-D. It means a person who has higher authority and power. You could say a king was a lord. It's a generic word. It's not a specific name for God. They also had the word Elohim, which is what is normally translated God in the Old Testament. But that's also not a particular name for our God. It was used for the idolatrous gods, okay? Now here's something about Elohim that maybe you didn't know. Shortened form of Elohim is El, E-L, okay? And if you ever find, and Bill Ray isn't here, is he? Bill Ray knows that when I say never or always or absolute kind of words, well, I'm going to do absolute kind of words a number of times today. So if I'm wrong, catch me. But Elohim starts with El. You can find many names of people, many names of towns, many names of other places in the Old Testament that have those two letters, E-L, in them. And every time you find that, yeah, name of other gods, it's a generic name. But anytime you find those two letters E-L, God is something in that name. And I looked back today to a whole bunch of names, and there's just, every one of them is the L something and L something, and it's always something about God. Bethel is the name of a town. Beth-El, the L is at the end of the word. It means God's house. See, right in the name is they're talking about God. El can be at the beginning of the word, the end of the word, and the middle of the word. Okay? Yeah, Baal, B-A-A-L or B-A-E-L. Okay? And it was used for an idol god. Yeah, you're right, sure. Okay. So at any rate, there are different words for God in the Old Testament. Adonai was used, God was used, and so forth. Now I want to read to you out of the preface of my New International. It's kind of a summary of what I've said so far. And it's called The Proper Name of God in the Old Testament. In the Scriptures, the name of God is most significant and understandably so. It is inconceivable to think of spiritual matters without a proper designation for supreme deity. You know what proper designation means? It means the right name. Thus, the most common name for God, name for the deity, is God, a translation of the original Elohim, which I just talked about. One of the titles for God is Lord, not all uppercase, a translation of Adonai, which is Lord. There is yet another name which is particularly assigned to God as his special or proper name. That is the 4 letters YHWH. And right here it mentions Exodus 3:14 that I read to you a little bit ago. This name, YHWH, has not been pronounced by the Jews because of the reverence for the great sacredness of the divine name. And I mentioned that. Instead of that, they say Adonai. I had a good Jewish friend when I was in high school, and he asked me to come with him to, they don't call it synagogue, they call it temple on Saturday morning, and I went with him. And every Jewish time, they'll have somebody up reading some Hebrew out of the Old Testament. Now, people don't speak Hebrew in the United States very well, so they have Hebrew classes for their kids, and adults study it and so forth. But when they would come to the name of God, they would say Adonai. I heard it with my own ears to this day. Okay, anyway, but it says, not been pronounced by the Jews because of reverence for the great sacredness of the divine name. Therefore, it has been consistently translated L capital, O capital, R capital D. So this is something that you can find in the Pew Bible and in mine, the New American Standard, in most Bibles, that if you see the word Lord, that's all caps. That's the name of God. If you didn't know that, now you know it. Okay? You with me? Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the New Testament. There is no word, I'm saying that again, that Bill Ray would probably catch me on. No, what do you mean no? There is no word in the Greek New Testament for JHVH. Now think for a minute. Why wouldn't there be? How can you translate a word that is considered untranslatable? Unsayable. You see what I'm saying? There's no word in Greek for this. Greek has a number of other words that is used for God. The normal word for God in the Greek is theos, Theos, and that's where we get our English word theology. Theology means the study of God. Theos is the word for God. And it's used in Mark 12:26 that I'm going to read for you a little bit later 4 different times. Let's go back to Mark. We read Mark 12:26. Turn the page over to the next page to Mark 12:29. Okay? With me? Mark 12:29. Somebody asked him a question, Jesus a question, what's the most important commands? Jesus answered, verse 29, the most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Do you notice that here the word Lord and Lord are not all caps? That's not the name of God. That's this word, in Greek it's kurios. The Lord our God is theos. God is theos and kurios is Lord. Okay. And by the way, here in this, it says the Lord our God is one. This is something I didn't know until I did this little study. We have an English word one, and we can use it a whole different ways. But when I looked this one up, I found out that this is not a normal word that we would say one. It literally means the number one, as in 1, 2, 3, 4. You got a footnote that says that? One Lord, okay. My point is that it's not just, it's specific. It's the number one in the text. Okay, enough of that. All right. Okay, now I want to read to you a comment. Yeah.
You said Lord was all capitalized here,
Mark, well, yeah, it's not all caps there.
in mine it is, but it's referring me back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, saying the exact same thing where the word Lord is not all capitalized.
But in the Greek here, it's not. It's one of these other words. Okay? Now it's talking, what? Oh yeah, consistency is hard to find in everything, including in and remember, I'm talking when I was saying L-O-R-D all caps, that's the Old Testament. Okay? Greek is different than Hebrew.
I was assuming the New Testament had it all caps because it was referring back to the original back in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy.
Not necessarily. But it doesn't mean it's not talking about God. Remember, in the New Testament, you don't have an equivalent for JHVH. It's just not there, ever, anywhere. Okay? But he is talking about God, though. There are different words to use for God. Okay. Okay, anyway, going back to Exodus 3 again, the two words I am is used to refer to God in Exodus 3:14. 3:14. Let's read that. Moses said to God, the Israelites are going to say, what do I tell them when they ask me what your name is? Verse 14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. That's all caps. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Now I did a little study on what these words are. In the Hebrew, I am who I am is three words. The first I am is word one, who is word two, and I am is the same word again. Three words in the Hebrew, okay? So I am here is one word. You with me? Now, I am in Hebrew here is a verb. Now, that may surprise you, think for a second. My name is Terry. Terry is not a verb. Terry eats. Terry's the subject or the noun. Eats is the verb, okay? But here I am is a verb. It's a word of action. Well, what is it? Okay, I want to go back to Exodus 3. In the New American Standard, it has a comment here where it talks about verse 14. It says this word is related to the name of God. That is, I am, is related to the name of God, YHWH, rendered Lord, which is derived from another Hebrew word, which is HAYAH, which is the verb to be. I am is related to be. Well, that's true in English. I am, you are, he is. They're all versions of the verb I am. So what does it mean to say I am who I am? As he says in Exodus 3:14. He's talking about his existence, his being. In the New Testament, the word eternal is used to describe God. What does eternal mean? It's a word in the New Testament. It means forever. And here's where we get the idea that God wasn't born. God doesn't die. God has lived forever, which is something none of us can ever say, although we can say we started at birth and, we believe we're going to live after death. But God never started. God is eternal. And that's part of what is being said when he says, I am. I am the being who lives forever in both directions. I don't know if you'd ever thought about that, but it's there. Okay, now I want to go to you the New Testament. In the New Testament, I am is also found. And we're going to read a number of verses here in just a minute. Wow, this is good. This is going faster than what I thought it was going to go. Okay, but in the New Testament, it's two words. I am is two words. The word for I is ego. The word for am is me. I, ego. You ever heard the word ego? Ego, E-G-O? What does ego mean? It means I, me. If a person's an egomaniac, what are they? They're a maniac that can only think about me. You see? That's where we get the word. Egomaniac is all about me, 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 me. Okay? Ego means I in Greek. Okay? And me is a verb, and it means am, as in, the verb am, I am. Okay. Now, why am I saying that? Because we're going to read a whole bunch of verses in here that have ego, me in them. But sometimes it's not really translated that way. And I want to show to you how that this can be a good, or maybe, I think, sometimes it's a very bad. Mark 13, verse 6 is the first one. Jesus is talking about the temple being destroyed and what's going to happen about that time. Mark 13, verse 6. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many. That's in the normal text of the New American Standard and also the NIV, okay? But here's where it's important to me. The word he is not in that text. It is not ego, me, he. The word he is not there. And so in my translation, in the New American Standard, it's I am he, and he is in italics. Now, you know what italics means, don't you? Say what italics means.
It's a word to make it easier for me.
Right. It's not in the text, but it's made to help the person understand. And that's not a bad thing. Often that's a good thing to help us understand what the writer is trying to get across. But sometimes it can be a bad thing. And years ago, one time I think I was reading this Mark 13:6, maybe it was another one, and I read that, and it was the first time it dawned on me that he was in italics. And I thought, wait a minute, if he's in italics and it's not in the text, maybe it shouldn't be understood as I am he. Maybe it should be understood as I am. And what's I am a word used for in the Old Testament? It's a name for God. Now let's read a number of these verses here without him or he. Mark 13:6. Many will come in my name claiming I am, and will deceive many. There were other people who came before and after the time of Christ who said that they were the Messiah, they were God, they were coming to earth. And he said they're going to come and they're going to deceive many people. Him here doesn't help understand that. Next one is John 4:25 and 26. This is Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the well. We all know that story, okay? Here we go. The woman said, that's the Samaritan woman, I know the Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am. And there's a word he there. The word he is not in the text. It's ego and me. Two words, I and am. Jesus said, I, the one who is speaking to you, I am. She understood what he was saying. It's a different meaning. Thank you. I'm glad you agree with me on that. I wondered if I would have some people arguing about that. Yeah. So you just have to understand, italics means a word not in the text. And as long as you understand that, you got a good idea. Moving on. John 8:24, he's talking to the Pharisees. Okay? John 8:24. I told you that you would die in your sins if you do not believe that I am he. You will indeed die in your sins. He is again in italics in the New American Standard because it's not in the Greek. It's ego I me. There's only two words there in the Greek. Right. He's using the two words that Jews in the New Testament understood was a name for God, just like it was a name for God in the Old Testament. John 8:28, again talking to the Pharisees. So Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man. What's that talking about? What does he mean when he says, when you, the Pharisees, have lifted up the Son of Man? The cross. The Pharisees were the ones who turned him over to the Romans to have him killed. They had put him on the cross, so to speak. So Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing in my own but speak just what the Father has taught me. But there's no he there. It's I am. We got just a couple more, and then we'll be kind of finished with this. John 8:58-59. Now this one, to me, is the killer of all of these verses. This is the one that says it so strongly. John chapter 8, verse 58 and 59. First, just verse 58. He's talking to the Jews. Verse 58. Very truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, comma, I am. And no translation puts he there. Now think about what he's actually saying here. Before Abraham was born, I am. Think about that. Jesus is talking 2,000 years before Abraham. Okay? Before Abraham was born, I am. Jesus is saying right here, he was alive before Abraham was born. 2,000 years before his time, before he was born in his body on earth. If that doesn't whop you some, you're missing the whole point here. And here's where verse 59 comes in. The Jews, hearing what Jesus just said, don't like this a bit. So we have the very next verse, 59. At this, they, the Jews, picked up stones to stone him. But did they stone him? Nope. He gets away. And here's where there's some really, bad translation here. At this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself. Now that sounds like Jesus did something sneaky there in those words, hid himself, okay? That's not what the good translation should be, because I looked this one up too. If he hid himself, there's Greek active, middle, and passive. Active is I hide. Middle is actually what would be said here. Hid himself is called the middle tense, but this is not either one of those. This is passive. You guys know what passive means, don't you? It happens to you. The correct translation of here is was hidden. It's passive. You got that? Now, what on earth does that mean? If Jesus was hidden, what does that mean? I think it means he became invisible. And I think it because of what the rest of the verse says. Now again, this is not a good translation in the NIV. It says, slipping away from the temple grounds. And I thought, there is no way that says that in the Greek. Slipping away like he's, tricking people and, hey, look over there, and he runs that way. No, that's not what it's saying. And so I went back to see what it actually says in the Greek. And I've done this a couple of times where I'll take the Greek, and I'm going to read the Greek in John 8:59, but the English words in their order in the Greek. You with me? This is what it exactly says in John 8:59 in the Greek said in English words. Jesus, however, was hidden, which we already talked about, and went out of the temple, going through the middle of them, and passed by that way. There's words in here that are not shown in the normal translation for John 8:59. It just says slipping away. But the actual Greek word says he passed through the middle of them. The words are there in the Greek. And that's correct. He didn't slip away. He walked right through the middle of them and got away. And the only answer I can figure out as to how he did that is he was hidden. He was invisible. Now, I could be wrong about that. Or maybe they just couldn't. Yeah, maybe they were blinded or whatever. But he walked right through the middle of them and got away. They didn't catch him. They didn't stone him. It wasn't his time to die. Okay, comments on anything I've said about that? And we still have 10 minutes. Didn't take the whole time, and we covered 2 words in Mark 12, wherever that is. Mark 12, 26. Okay, any comments on anything I said? I hope this was helpful. I hope that you learned something today that you didn't know before. I hope that it was interesting to you, Ted.
Something that I'm sure you're already aware of is, I'm going back to something that was mentioned earlier about the name of God and how it was written and reverenced by the Jewish people over the years. And I know you've seen this too, but I've seen Betsy Scroll a couple of times at exhibitions. And one of the things that amazed me was looking at scriptures that were actually written by Jewish people 100 or 200 years BC.
Yeah,
Copying scriptures, and that when you concentrate on it, you see a difference in the ink, how it shines on the paper than you did with the other words. It had to be pointed out. It was set in a little text underneath the exhibit I was looking at.
I've never heard this before. What are you getting at?
Well, you know how all of a sudden some words can stand out on
Yeah.
the page because they're written different,
Yeah,
whether it's brighter ink or whatever.
yeah.
On the scripture that I was looking at, this was an actual copy. It was that way every time God's name was in the scripture.
So they made the words in ink stand out from the other words.
And you didn't notice it until that little book at the bottom pointed it out to you. When I looked back up to it, boom, it was there.
How about that? I'd never heard that before. But for you guys, if you got nothing out of this, I want you to remember that if you see the word Lord with all caps, that's the name of God. If you don't get anything else, don't forget that. And that's the way it is in my translation. That's the way it is in the Pew Bible. Any other comments on that? We got a few more minutes. Pointing over there. Oh, there you are, the preacher.
I love the clarity with which the New Testament, specifically Jesus and the Gospels, says who he is. When he uses those 2 Greek words, ego, eimi, everybody knew what he was saying.
The Jews knew. The Romans wouldn't have, but you're right. The Jews all knew that.
He was not even saying just I am God. No, he was deeper than that by
Yeah.
using the translation of divine name. They knew exactly which God, because that would be the question. Okay, you're God. All right, which God? But by using the divine name, they knew exactly which
Yes, yes,
God, the only God.
yes, yes.
That's why they wanted
The God of the Old Testament.
That's the reason why they took stones to stone him, because he
Yes.
was black. As far as they were concerned, he was black.
As far as they were concerned, he was blaspheming, right. But he wasn't blaspheming. He was telling them the truth that they didn't want to hear. Right. Were you done, Nathan? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know. Y'all want 5 minutes, or can we go ahead?
Like Wally used to say, sometimes you need extra hug and hug time.
Sure. Why not? Okay. We covered 2 words. Next week, we're going to start at the top of the next page, Mark 12:28. Appreciate your kind attention. I hope this was helpful. How about that?